in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 22, the Bible reads as follows: by faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones. Now, this is really amazing that that's what the Bible says about Joseph. Now, we remember that Joseph was sold into slavery. He was, in Genesis, in Genesis 37, verse 1 to about 3, the Bible talks about how he was about 17 years old when he began to have these dreams, and he was sharing these dreams with his family about what God was going to do. He was just filled with faith about, he really believed in these dreams that God was giving to him. And we don't really, from there, he's sent to go check up on his brothers. And that's really the last time his father sees him for a big chunk of his life. But the Bible specifically there in verse 1 to 3 of chapter 37, it tells us that he was 17 years old. And so, he probably arrives in Egypt. He's about maybe, still 17 or 18 years old. And that's how he begins his life there on his own as a teenager, as a youngster who is just holding on to these dreams that God says that he's going to make him someone great one day. And then the story unfolds, and he goes through a very difficult time. But then, he's in prison, and then he's out of prison, and he's serving, and then he works his way up to a point where he is second in command in Egypt. He reports to no one else but Pharaoh. He is second in charge. Life is so good. In fact, at this point where he gives this instruction, and we're going to read about that a little bit later, but he is doing so well in Egypt. He saved so many people through just his wisdom, his diligence, being able to interpret the dreams that Pharaoh had, the 7 years of plenty, the 7 years of scarcity. And he gets them through all of that, and he is elevated and really loved in Egypt. And then the end of his life comes. He is about 110 years old when he makes this promise, or he makes his family promise him and on oath that they will carry his bones. So let's go there in Genesis chapter 50. And this is really, this really convicted me as I was reading. This is the last chapter in the book of Genesis. As it closes, the Bible says Joseph stayed in Egypt along with all his father's family. He lived 110 years and saw the third generation of Ephraim's children. Also, the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were placed at birth on Joseph's knees. Then Joseph said to his brothers, I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph made the Israelites swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place. So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. Now, here he is at the end of his life. He is doing so well. He is, he's achieved all success in Egypt. Egypt is doing well. He's wealthy. He's powerful. He's famous. And as he gets to the end of his life, he says to his brothers, and he makes them take an oath, and he says, and God allows them to be able to see in the future. Now, you have to understand, it's about 400 years before the children of Israel leave Egypt to go into the promised land. And God allows him to clearly see 400 years in the future to them, even though it was so good in Egypt, even though his life was just working out and things were going so well for him, he can see ahead and he says, as good as Egypt is, I don't want to be buried here. I want to be buried in the land is going to be fulfilled. I don't want, because Egypt it's a land of the dead. And he wants to be in the land of the living, which is the promised land where God gave the promise to Abraham. And so he says, please, please, I want you, as good as life is here, I don't belong here. I am not of this world. I live my life thinking about the world where I belong. So he not only began with faith as he entered Egypt, he ends with faith. He doesn't want his bones to rot in Egypt, but he rather wants to be taken with and be buried in the land of the living in Canaan, where God is going to reign and bless his people. It must have taken so much effort for him. He planned this, it says that, he was then embalmed, to make sure that his bones, you want to preserve these bones for 400 years. And so he wants to make sure that, it must have cost him so much money. If you wanted today to be, mummified and preserved, it would cost you at least 1 million rands, just that process alone. Now, think about, you want your bones to be preserved, to be carried along through the desert for another 40 years into the promised land. It must have taken a lot of intentional and deliberate planning on his side. But what's amazing, what blows my mind away about Joseph is that even though Egypt was so good to him, he never took his eyes away from the world and the land to come, from God's promise. His faith, even at the end, at 110 years, 110 years old, he still had this faith that God is going to fulfill his promise. In the same way that when he was young, he was a youngster, he was working in Potiphar's house, and Potiphar's wife wanted to, to sleep with him. And he says, no, I can't, because I belong to God. God is still to fulfill his promise in my life, and I've got to honor God, and he's holding on to God's promise for him. He's a youngster. Years and years later, he's still holding on to God's promises for his life. He says, God promised us that he's going to bless us. He's going to take us out of Egypt into the promised land. My journey doesn't end here in Egypt. And I've had to ask myself some difficult questions, because I've gone through a very difficult time in the last 2 years. My faith has been challenged, from all angles in the last 2 years. And as I read this, and as I was hearing this sister sharing it on Saturday, I was just so challenged to the core. And I've had to ask myself some difficult questions. Is my faith going to be this at the end of my life? Is that reflected in my planning? Is that reflected in how I spend my time? Do I spend my time today as one who is holding on to the promise of the New Jerusalem? Do I want my soul to be in the New Jerusalem? Joseph wanted his bones to be in the promised land. Do I want my soul to be in the New Jerusalem? How am I spending my time, my energy? What about my money? Am I making provisions? He must have had to be very intentional, even about, you can see why he forgave his brothers. Because, they not only needed him, but he also needed them about God's promise. And so he knows, man, if I'm to get from here to God's promised land, I need my brothers. I've got to forgive them. Is that how we think? Is that how we process even our children? Do we think, man, I've got to love my children. I've got to, pray for them and pray with them and read with them and impart faith and make decisions that will inspire faith in their lives. Because not only do I want to make it, I want all of us to make it. What about the people that we meet? Do we that we encounter and share our faith with? Do we do the Bible studies with so much diligence, knowing that, man, we've got to all make it. We've got to have the kind of faith that will be tested and will stand the test of time, even when we are 110 years old. Can you imagine if that's how we studied the Bible with people, that we sit down to do the word study and discipleship study and the Jesus study, we look at all these Bible studies and we are thinking, I am investing in this person for their faith to stand the test of time. That when they are 110 years old, they will still be looking forward to the New Jerusalem. Are you looking forward to the New Jerusalem? When you die, often we know someone's hopes and their wishes from their last wishes that they make before they die. And for Joseph, his last wishes, his last hopes were to be with God's people in their promised land. What are your hopes and your wishes? What is it that you desire with all of your heart? What is it that you are investing in? Are you making allocations? Are you saying, man, I want to make sure that my faith can stand the test of time. I want to make sure that my soul is gonna make it, because the Bible tells us that there will be a renewal, that the New Jerusalem is coming, and that there's gonna be this new birth, and we are going to be able to be there. Our brothers and sisters who have come and gone, who have slept in Jesus, they are going to raise up and be able to meet Jesus, and then all of us are going to be able to join them and see Jesus. Do we believe that, my brothers and sisters? Do we see that as clear as day and night? I am so inspired, I've often that, as I'm doing this study, and I thought, man, I wonder what happened to his bones. I wonder if they were able to stand the test of time, and if they remembered to carry them to the promised land. Let's go to Exodus chapter 13. In Exodus chapter 13, as the children of Israel, this is about 400 years later, and Moses, has come and he's getting God's people. There are about, Joseph was the first one to go into Egypt, and then he marries an Egyptian woman and he has children, and then his family come and they join him. The total count of all the descendants of Abraham as they've entered Egypt is about 70 to 75, depending on how the count is done in the different Bible texts. So the numbers that you will encounter is that the descendants of Jacob were 66 as they went in. That doesn't factor Joseph because he was already in there, and his son includes Joseph and his children, and then a different Stephen, for example, he talks about 75. That may also include all the children of Joseph all together there, or it may also include the wives of the sons of Jacob. But the number is between 70 and 75. As the story begins in Egypt, by the time they left, it is estimated that there were 2 million people that left Egypt to go into the promised land. And the Bible says, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. For God said, if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people around the desert road towards the Red Sea. The Israelites went out of Egypt ready for battle. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him because Joseph had made the Israelites swear an oath. He had said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up with you from this place. Joseph's bones made it out of Egypt. They got out. He left with God's people as they left to go to the promised land. And he was buried, in the promised land. What an amazing story of a young man who began his journey with God. He began with faith and he ended with faith. All of us are writing our story. I don't know what you are facing. I don't know the challenges that you are going through. But I hope that you will begin and end with faith, just like Joseph. That, there'll be a lot of things in between, ups and downs and challenges and hurts and pain and all these different things and lots of gains and lots of losses and all these different, but most importantly, you can be able to withstand oftentimes, when the trials come, but sometimes we never prepare for the good times to be faithful even when things are going well. You realize that Joseph, even though his life was going so well towards the end of his life, and God blessed him so much in Egypt, and he never gave up that dream. He never got so comfortable and so happy in Egypt that he saw himself as an Egyptian. Even in abundance and even though times were so good in Egypt, because Joseph didn't know the slavery, and the one that the people after him got to know, but he really, the end of his life was good. He was in service to Pharaoh for almost 70 to between 70 and 90 years that he served a Pharaoh. He did well for a very long time, but even that never got him to be so comfortable that he forgot who he is, an Israelite who is living under God's promise of a promised land. And I hope that even us, that no matter how good our lives get here, no matter how well things go in this world and in this life, that we will never forget whose we are. We will never forget that this is not our home. That we live our lives with the hope of the world to come, with the hope of the new Jerusalem, when our King will come and take us, and lead us in victory into the promised land that is the new Jerusalem. I hope that this message and this character, Joseph, encourages you as much as it has encouraged me. I hope that it lifts your faith through whatever trials you are going through. Even, as we think about this COVID, it's so difficult. Just as we think, man, we're going to have outdoor services, we're going to enjoy ourselves, then we hear there's a third wave coming. It's so difficult to even plan for the next month or 2 months, or we just don't know what we are walking into and what we are living with. But I hope that through all the ups and downs that we experience, we never forget that our King still reigns supreme. To God be the glory. I love you, my brothers and sisters.
In your hands, Lord, I'm longing to see your desires revealed in me. I give myself away. I give myself away so you can use me. I give myself away. I give myself away so you can use me.